Thank you. It's a teamwork. A lot of good volunteers have contributed to this over the years, and will be recognized at the end of this, by the way, with your permission again. Thank you. So if you don't mind, just a couple of questions. When I designed the questions, I didn't know about your speech, by the way. So some of those have already been covered.
Oh, okay.
And apologies if there are overlaps, and make them, quick reference to them. Whatever you have mentioned, you may want to skip those, but we can go through them quickly, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And then we have some time for a couple of questions. Okay, sounds like a good
Sounds
plan.
wonderful.
Okay, excellent. So this is the 150-year anniversary of Canada. The country is celebrating, and we celebrated the Canadian science and the contributions of scientists last evening at the gala, and it's a very happy year. But we also have to project our own future, and would like to know what is your vision and idea about the areas that we can, Canada can excel in future.
Thanks, Mehrdad. I'm going to come back to, I'm just back from the G7. And I have to tell you, 12 hours after Dr. Niemer had been named as our chief science advisor, the big news at the G7 was that Canada had a chief science advisor. Colleagues rushed over. They were so excited. And people really see Canada as a beacon for science. Canada is open to the world. Canada is welcoming, and Canada is open to ideas. And I think we have to seize this moment. I think it's a very unique and special time, and we have to seize it. I've talked about priorities. It's absolutely investing in investigator-led research. Investing to make sure we have predictable and sustainable labs and tools. And there are so many areas I could highlight, but Arctic science, this is in our backyard, this very fragile environment. That's one area. Precision medicine, regenerative medicine, quantum, and this never goes well because someone's gonna go, she didn't name my discipline. Said, guys, that's as funny as I get. There are many areas I could highlight. Artificial intelligence. We have enormous strengths in this country. And one of the great joys of this job is being able to go university to university, the colleges, the polytechnics, everyone brings a different strength. I always thought when I finished this job, one day I would return to the university. Not now. I see what these young researchers are doing, and they think differently, they ask different questions, things we couldn't even imagine.
That was very good.
Is that passable?
Yes, absolutely.
I got tied.
That's good, thank you. You have spoken all the time quite passionately about diversity in science and equity. And this is a high priority for you, and I think for the country should be, and we are so thankful for that. As an immigrant, I must thank you for emphasizing on this matter. And it's so important as a country with 20% immigrant now. And the diversity and equity should be a priority in science. And, but I want to ask you, what's your vision for promoting and advancing women in science?
I like what you said. I think it has to be a priority for all of us. I taught at the university a long time. And I think of my students. I think of one young woman who was from a minority community, who had a physical disability, and the barriers that she faced. We have to be committed to diversity and excellence go hand in hand. That when we come with different perspectives, different ideas, we ask different research questions, we may use different methodologies, and we may get better results that benefit everyone. The two examples I would give, the first heart valves, created by researchers who happen to be largely male, and they made heart valves for male-sized hearts. First voice recognition software, calibrated only to male voices. Or what about airbags? Made by engineers, the first prototype for male-sized bodies. And what happened when those airbags went on the road? It was women and children who were hurt. We need all of us in the field, at the table, in the lab, because we'll get better science.
Thank you. You mentioned briefly in your speech, and if you want to elaborate on that, I want to talk about the big elephant in the room, with your permission. So, okay, so the recommendations for from Fundamental Science Review Panel. I would like to know is if there is a plan to work and adopt. That was a okay.
You said the elephant in the room.
That was, I guess.
You said the elephant in the room. I knocked off the microphone, and it gave a good boom when you said the elephant in the room.
They'll come
now
and
I
fix
have no
it.
way to get it back on.
They will fix it. No worries. I think somebody can help Minister. But I'm just wondering if there is any plan to adopt any of the recommendations and in whole or in part.
Thanks, Mayor Dad. I think there was concern in the spring that this report would be buried, would be hidden, it would never see the light of day. Does that sound familiar? Oh, uncomfortable laughing. I know that was the fear. I commissioned the report for a reason. I wanted to get the evidence. I wanted to use that evidence as a path forward. I insisted that the report be released at the Public Policy Forum. Why? To start a discussion we've never had in this country, a discussion about science and science funding. It matters. That report, and I cannot say thank you enough to the panel, and I try to say it publicly every time. They did terrific work, and everyone in this room knows they did terrific work. It gives us a good path forward. I agree with the majority of the recommendations. I've been clear in the spring that governance and coordination, absolutely. Do we need a body to coordinate that'll make things easier for our researchers? We do. And I have these presidents here who I know are committed to doing just that. Do I believe we need an advisory committee? Oh, you would be lovely. You're a very nice gentleman. Thank you so much. Do we need an advisory committee? Yes. Should it be public-facing? Should you know what they're going to study? Yes. So last week we released the coordinating committee. All of you, I think most of you have been in this room today. One of the recommendations was to cap tier ones. We capped them, effective yesterday, November 1st. So we are working on this. You're going to see things roll out in the short, medium, and long term. You want me to do the money now, right?
I didn't say anything.
I should have just, you know, folks, I thought I had thought of two different ways of starting this talk. One, I was going to come in and say, let's talk about the elephant in the room. And I could start with the money. But if I started with it, you'd never hear anything after that. And then I thought, well, I could end with the money, but you would never hear the beginning. And so I didn't see a good way of doing this. The money. Again, my priorities are investing in investigator-led research, number one. Making sure we have sustainable, predictable funding for our labs and tools, number two. And I have real difficulty right now. I have labs, world-renowned labs in Canada that don't operate all year round. I want to fix that. So it is a big ask. Is it something we can do in one budget or one mandate? Look, the previous government dug a big hole. It's going to take time to fix, but you have someone who's a champion for you.
Thank you. I skip a couple of questions because I want to leave time for the audience to ask questions. But last one for me. Last year here during the Q&A, you were 1 year into your mandate, and I asked you about your achievements today, and this is the second year. Let's do it again. What has been your achievements in this?
Okay, fair enough. What have we accomplished in 2 years? I'm going to start by saying we are a government that is committed to science, to research, the hard work of our researchers in evidence-based decision-making. Day one of this government, we brought back the long-form census. Why? We need the data. Day two, we unmuzzled our scientists. It's not enough to say we've unmuzzled our scientists. There has to be a new communication policy developed. We worked hard to develop it, but it's culture change. Culture change takes time. Myself and Minister Bryson wrote to all the ministers, our colleagues, reminding them we want our scientists to talk freely. We want them to collaborate. That's how science is done. And when I meet with journalists, I usually ask, do you notice a difference? The answer I get back is we can't keep up with the demand from the scientists for stories. That is real change. That makes me really happy. Are we going to hear a story here and there? Maybe, but there's a real change. The first budget was a good budget for science. $2 billion for research and innovation infrastructure across the country. Much of the infrastructure was 25 years old. That's a good help. But I've been clear, buildings don't do research, people do. You gotta invest in our researchers. And that year, we had the largest top up to 3 federal granting councils in a decade. I launched a fundamental science review with an extraordinary blue ribbon panel. How many ministers do you know who would have launched such a review? I did it because it hadn't been done in 40 years. Can you imagine any other system that went unreviewed for 40 years? And because I wanted the evidence, I'd like you to know I didn't do the report for my health. Geez, you're tough. I didn't do it for my health. I did it because it's the right thing to do so we would have an evidence-based path forward. The last budget, $125 million in artificial intelligence. How is that making a difference? We're investing in Montreal, in Toronto, in Edmonton. And I come back to that important lesson. Those investments in fundamental science go back to 1982. We're at a tipping point. You make the investments and business comes. I'm really excited. We have a chief science advisor. Did I mention that? And we think she's pretty terrific. She has hit the ground running. She's been to the United States. She's been down to AAAS. She's been to Boston. She's getting out there. She's meeting with all of you. And she's bringing back a similar message. The message is this is a unique period of time. Let's take advantage of it. And I'm proud of the changes we've made on equity and diversity. My first year going from coast to coast to coast, I did not go to a place where some young woman didn't cry in my arms. They said it's hard to be in science, but it's not just for women. I want to change this for women, Indigenous peoples, people that come from that are minorities, and people with disabilities. And remember my student, a young woman, a minority from minority community, and a disability, and the barriers that she faced. What I can tell you now is when I go across the country, I don't have young women saying that anymore. I don't have Indigenous people saying that anymore. What I hear is we have hope and that the system is going to change for the better for all of us.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So now we have some time for questions from the floor. There are 2 mics here, over there and over there. Please use the mics and ask your questions.
You mean, Mayor Dad, I'm still not off the hot seat?
No, unfortunately not yet, so please.
I tried, I had the mic.
Thank you for your patience.
Is it me?
Imogen, please.
Is this on?
Yeah.
So thank you, Minister Duncan. Imogen Cody, Dean of Science, Ryerson University. So I do a lot of work in the equity, diversity, and inclusion sphere, and I want to thank you on behalf of many underrepresented groups across Canada for your tireless advocacy in support of equity and diversity and making it a priority. Thank you.
Could I respond to that, Imogen?
Okay, but I have a question as well.
Okay, but I want to respond to that because you have been a tireless champion for equity and diversity. There are other people in this room, and I'll also add in our champions, our male champions. Yes. But I'd like to recognize you for the work you've done.
Thank you for that. Well, I'm really touched. But now I'm going to ask you a tough question.
I said I was still on the hot seat.
So thank you for raising this and putting this on the table as a non-negotiable, as a part of science policy that we must embrace because it will lead to better science and better outcomes for everybody. It is an economic imperative, it is a social imperative, it is a national imperative. So, however, this is an area where Canada is cannot be looked to globally as a leader in the area of equity, diversity, and inclusion in science. And if we look at some of our comparators like the UK, Australia, we can see programming in place for cultural change, institutional change, organizational change. When will we see in Canada a program like the Athena Swan, the SAGE pilot, or the Sea Change, which will actually lead to substantial, sustainable cultural and institutional change that will lead to real equity, inclusion, and diversity?
Imogen, thank you for such an important question. Again, thank you for the work you do. And before I answer that, I am going to highlight some male champions. Dr. Art McDonald, Dr. Neil Turok, Dr. Ted Hewitt, Mario Pinto. Thank you all for being champions in this area. I'll take you through the actions we've taken to date, and we're exploring more actions. This is about, as you say, it is the right thing to do, and it's an economic imperative and social imperative for our country. We've brought back the Universities and Colleges Academic Staff Survey, UCAS. Everyone know UCAS? Canceled by the previous government. The survey existed since 1937. I assume all of us in the room want the data, yes? We want to know, are women and men progressing through the academic ranks at the same rate? We want to look at the pay. It's always been for full-time universities. We're going to extend that to the colleges, and we're going to extend it to part-time faculty. We've put in place new diversity and equity requirements for the Canada Excellence Research Chairs, the CERCs, $10 million over 7 years. We have 27 CERCs in Canada, very prestigious, and we thank everybody for their research. But it's not okay that there's only one woman holding a chair. So we've got new diversity and equity requirements there. On the Canada Research Chairs, I've been clear that the universities have to put in place, I think I should ask Ted and Mario, December 15th? December 15th is coming up. That they have to put in place diversity and equity plans, how they're going to make their Canada Research Chairs targets, and they have 2 years to do that, or we will withhold funding. Today, we launched the capping of the Tier 1 Canada Research Chairs. Why? I want more people to have the opportunity to have one of these prestigious chairs. It'll help our mid-career researchers, and it will help with equity and diversity. Those are the actions taken to date. And being a scientist, I always want the data, and we will look at what measures need to be explored going forward. Imogen, thanks for that great question.
Thank you, Minister Duncan, for your talk, and thank you for listening to the science community and your willingness to listen and learn from the community as well. My question's around priority areas, and as you know, science takes time, and particularly basic science takes time. So what are your thoughts on a long-term priority area strategy for the government rather than priority areas that change with every mandate of government that comes in?
Sorry, I don't know your name, and I don't know where you're from.
Sorry, Fouad El-Ghani from Queen's University. We're one of the CFREF-funded initiatives, so thank you for that.
Congratulations. Thank you. It's an excellent question, and I am working, right now, I am rebuilding. We have a decade where science funding, well, you'll have seen it in the Fundamental Science Review, science funding increased and it decreased over a decade. The numbers, because I'm a numbers person, fell from 3rd to 8th on higher education R&D in 10 years. We fell from 18th to 26th on business R&D in 10 years. And for the first time, we're out of the top 30. My goal, I want to change that trajectory. So I think it's very important to build that long-term strategy. Right now, I am focused on investigator-led, I can't say this enough times, and making sure our researchers have the labs and tools they need to succeed.
Jeremy.
Good evening. Minister Duncan, good evening. I'm Jeremy Kerr from University of Ottawa, Department of Biology. Thank you very much for your very specific and focused remarks this evening. That was a marvelous update on the progress that you've been making as Minister of Science, and I'm grateful for this. Like many scientists and like many Canadians, I was very happy to have the chance to stand up and give a round of applause for the appointment of our new Chief Science Advisor, Dr. Mona Niemer, just a few weeks ago. This is a remarkable moment in Canadian history from my point of view. One of the things that science advice does, though, is it lets us cope with rapidly evolving situations. And there are some international precedents for science advice in case of emergencies. So, if I may ask, what do you feel the role of the Chief Science Advisor will be in terms of providing excellent and timely advice to government in times of emergency?
Thanks, Jeremy. And can I also recognize your enormous advocacy on science policy over the last many years? sure I'm doing a really bad job and you're cutting the mic.
You're good, by the way. That's good.
Thanks. Jeremy, thanks for the question. I see having a chief science advisor, having the awesome Dr. Niemer as a first step. We want to build that advisory system in government. And Dr. Niemer and I have talked. She will explore looking at having chief scientists in different departments. That will give her a network that she can pull together. As you discuss in emergency situations, I like the UK model of the chief science advisor. I like the chief scientists in the different departments. And you think of an emergency, and I know.
Let's just give you that one.
There's someone pulling my mic. What did you actually hear?
Well, I heard it all.
No one's ever really said I was quiet. So I'm not sure what you heard, so I'll just try again. We are really lucky to have Dr. Niemer. She is our chief science advisor for the country. I have asked her to explore the possibility of having chief scientists in the different science-based departments. And you can have them not just in science-based departments. In the United Kingdom, of course, they would have a chief science advisor in foreign affairs. I think it's really important that doctor have this network, a network of chief scientists. And I think during emergencies, as you mentioned, during an emergency, it would allow Dr. Niemer to pull this network together to quickly get the best scientific advice of the time, to provide myself, the Prime Minister, and Cabinet with information. And I know that's what they did, for example, in the UK with the nuclear disaster, and were food safe in the United Kingdom following. Thank you for the question.
So we have 3 more questions to go, if you don't mind.
You're still interested?
Absolutely. I guess everybody else.
Are you still interested?
So I'm Darren Anderson. I work for a private company called Vive Crop Protection. You've been emphasizing tonight your commitment to the Fundamental Science Review, and I think everyone here really appreciates your support for the recommendations of the Naylor report. And in addition, you've been quite clear tonight that you are going to be an advocate for increased investigator-led research, which I think is absolutely fantastic. So if I could have a round of applause for that. What can we do to help you make the case to your cabinet colleagues for increased support as part of the next couple of budget cycles?
Darren, thank you for your question. It's nice to meet you. You have a cabinet who really believes in science. The cabinet was so excited by Dr. Niemer's appointment. And I think she's already starting to get calls. I know Minister LeBlanc and Mr. McKenna had her as part of an oceans roundtable. How you can help? Tell the stories of science. Tell what research allows us to do. You know, when I go door to door in my community, even before I had this role, and I have the privilege of serving the community where I'm born and raised, people don't ask me about science, but people do ask me about their family. My mother has heart trouble. My grandmother has dementia. And I explain to them, that's the power of science. Science helps make lives better for Canadians and makes a better environment for us all. This room is so filled with so many stories. Share them with us. Share them with Canadians. Canadians support science. The new study, over 82% of Canadians support science. That's a wonderful number. It's not like that in other countries. There is a lack of trust. We have a unique period of time in Canada. Let's seize this. Help me tell the stories.
Minister Duncan, thank you for your speech, and I commend and applaud all of your goals in terms of advancing science, including your third goal, which is basically to increase increase curiosity in Canadians and to bring more young people into science. I'm a postdoctoral researcher, and I'm here. My name's Annie Hämäläinen, and I'm representing the Canadian Association of Postdoctoral Scholars. And largely in that role, I am curious about the ways that you propose to reconcile bringing more young people into science with the situation that we have, that more and more PhDs and graduate students face a situation where they will not find work in the academia or in research because those jobs do not exist. So what kind of steps can we take in Canada and perhaps internationally to secure job security in the long term for these new graduates who are very excited to be in science?
Annie, it's nice to meet you. Congratulations on your work, and thank you for speaking up tonight. I'm going to start way back here at the pipeline. All children are born curious. All children want to discover and explore. It's up to us to foster that natural-born curiosity through elementary school, through high school, and beyond. We want to attract our young people, and we want to retain them. You raise an issue that I'm really concerned about. And I've been raising it a number of times. I'm really concerned about our early career researchers. In some areas, they're not getting their first grant to age 43. How do you build a research career if you don't get a grant till age 43? That's one side of it. The other side is, I think for all of us who either mentored or had graduate students, it is up to us to open up a world of possibilities. Some people will want to stay in academia. I loved my research, and I loved working with my students. But there are many opportunities. They're not just in academia, they are in government. They're meeting people here today, finding out about how government works, how science policy works. There's opportunities in business, and I think part of it, when we mentor students, we have to open up that world and say there are opportunities in other places, but for those who want to stay in academia, it's my job, and I ask for your help, your advice. How do we make it easier for our early career researchers? I think we took an important step last week with this new coordinating committee, and that will be one of the areas they're working on. But if you have ideas, I want to hear them. Thanks, Annie.
Last question.
Hi, Alison Sekuler from Baycrest Health Sciences and University of Toronto and McMaster. I'll echo everyone's comments in saying thank you for all of the work you've done so far. And one of the issues that's come up in a number of sessions throughout the past couple of days is the fact that to be able to solve Canada's biggest problems and the world's biggest problems, we can't think in terms of this is SSHRC work, or this is NSERC work, and this is CIHR work, and that goes not just for interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research, but also for the Indigenous research, because a lot of that, because of the very nature of the work, involves, it may involve science, but also community work. I think a lot of us are holding out hope, I certainly am, that the coordinating committee that you've formed will be one of the ways in which we'll start to see the ideas that Ted and Mario and Mona have all put forward, that we need to find ways of having more integration across the various agencies. So I'm wondering, what's your plan for that? What's your hope for whether that committee is going to be working to make those sorts of changes? And then also, how will you be coordinating with, say, the Indigenous portfolios to make sure that there's coordination across the portfolios so that all of that work can get done as well?
Allison, I'm really having trouble with this mic. Allison, first of all, it's nice to see you again, and wonderful visit with you at McMaster. Thank you for the question. I really think this coordinating body, it'll be the 3 presidents of our 3 granting councils, the Deputy Minister of ISED, the Deputy Minister of Health. When it intersects with the National Research Council and with the Chief Science Advisor, they will be invited in. I think there's a real opportunity here to break down these barriers. When we look at global challenges, we think of climate change, it impacts, I don't have to tell this group, it impacts our fisheries, our forestries, our health, our agriculture, our water levels, our freshwater levels, our sea levels. It hits a wide area, a wide number of areas. And I think this coordinating committee is going to be able to look at how do we fund multidisciplinary research in this country better? How do we fund multinational research better? How do we fund multidisciplinary multinational research better? I think there's a real opportunity here. And as I've said, I've asked the committee that they develop a work plan. And I think they are, from what I've heard, equally excited to get started. In fact, have been really pushing. They're excited about this work. I'm glad you've raised Indigenous research with and by Indigenous peoples. We have a lot of work to do. And I know this will be an area the committee will also look at. And I'll raise the importance of traditional knowledge and science. We have a lot of work to do here. We tend to say, and we include traditional knowledge, and we include traditional knowledge. No, there's real work that needs to be done here. Are we talking to First Nations, Métis, Inuit? Are we developing a shared research agenda? I think these are some of the areas we have a lot of work to do. I had the privilege, enormous privilege, of serving on an Indigenous environmental board for many years. And it was probably the greatest learning of my life. Every meeting started by calling on the grandfathers for help. With smudge, so we would come with a clean heart. And we would spend 2 days getting to know one another as people. You don't do business till you know one another. We have a lot to learn. Recently, I was in Manitoba and meeting with elders. And people want to be asked. People want to be included. We have so much to learn when it comes to how we look at the environment. And I used to work up in the Arctic. You know, people I worked with would say, the researchers come for a few weeks a year. We've been here for millennia. When I was in the Arctic this summer, they named the 30 different kinds of snow. This Inuit woman explained that when there's this certain ripple at the shore, it means this wind is coming. We have a lot to learn, to see. So I will ask all of us to reach out to First Nations, to Métis, to Inuit peoples, and develop a shared agenda, how we do this better for reconciliation.
Thank you so very much. Great ending, but still not off the hook. One last request.
You're tough, Mayor Dad.
You like this one.
I am going to like this one. I've
Yes.
enjoyed all of this. These are good people.
You're kind. CSPC is relying a lot on the help of volunteers, most of whom are graduate students, postdoc from across the country, and some of whom made it here to the conference, some still in their work at their home, tweeting about CSPC, they're working. But those who are here, can I ask to join us at this stage for a photo op? You like this one?
I think we absolutely have to ask the amazing volunteers of CSPC to be recognized by all of us. We thank you for your tremendous work. This is a wonderful conference, and congratulations to all of you.